available. These COVID warriors, they went out and treated those patients. And this also included women who were in the reproductive age. So that means even during the menstrual cycle, they had to continue working. And if you go to the net, you will find small videos regarding how women have responded. They said that we had to continue working in long shifts, wearing that bulky PPE kits, and they did not even have time to change the sanitary napkins during the menstrual periods. And they were referred to as the bleeding COVID warriors. And hence, again, I would like to reiterate, everything said and done, women have borne the brunt of this pandemic very badly. Because men have died, the women, the social norm says that they are homemakers. Now they have to step out of their houses and take care of, the financial issues of the family, taking care of the children of the family, and hence the burden falls entirely on them. But yes, they have stood up to this pandemic and they have responded well in terms of being women leaders who have contributed in handling this coronavirus pandemic, as well as at a local level where the global health force is being led by women, with 70% of them being women. So it is in this, context, we decided to organize this program and on gender, disaster and sustainable communities. And throughout this program, you will see how women have contributed to building sustainable communities, even during the time of disasters. So thank you so much. I would like to thank K. Shroff College for, collaborating with the National Institute and taking the agenda of gender equality forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. May I now request Ms. Samita Sengupta, convener of WDEC, to introduce our first resource person for the day, Dr. Lavanya Shanba. Over to you, Samita madam.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Aarti madam. It's my immense pleasure to introduce one of today's eminent speakers, Dr. Lavanya Shanvaus Arvind. She is an assistant professor in the Center for Disasters and Development at Jamshedji Tata Institute School of Disaster Studies. Ma'am has also developed interest in the areas of gender disasters, gender development, and also gender and sexuality. Ma'am is an author, she is an academician, and she is a very good TED speaker also. She also provides training regarding gender sensitization and prevention of sexual harassment at the workplace. She is a freelancer, and also she, as well as she is a freelancer writer also. Ma'am has got enough interest in various ongoing projects, and within that, I would like to mention like special justice for pandemic resilient communities, and a review of recent orders and notification towards risk-informed planning and program. Ma'am has got enough credential to her name. So thank you so much, ma'am. It's over to Madam Lavanya.
Thank you very much, Samita ma'am, and thank you to BK Shroff College and NIDM and Dr. Vibhuti Patel, who's my teacher. Always pleasure to see her, and I have to apologize in advance. I'm on some other admissions duties at Tata Institute currently, so I'll be leaving after my session, and I'll hand over to Professor Patel, and she will, take care of the question answers. She taught me there's nothing that she can't handle. So thank you also to Dr. Ajinder Walia for that very nice and pertinent introduction to the program and why we need to integrate gender into our disaster risk reduction initiatives. So I'm going to share my screen, and I hope it's visible. I have a little PowerPoint, and I hope it's visible. Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
It's visible. Thank you. So I'm going to be looking at the critical linkages between gender equality, disaster management, and resilience. There's a lot of thrust today to talk about building resilience and why do we need a gendered dimension to resilience and our conversations about resilience. And I want to, and today we're also talking about climate change, we're talking about the pandemic, we're talking about sustainability, we're talking about these large canonical concepts, and they have to necessarily be integrated with the gender question. That's my request to this esteemed audience to think about gender. And primarily, I'm going to be talking about these three areas. So understand existing gender inequalities and how do we integrate the question of gender sensitivity into all our interventions on disaster risk reduction. And it has to be grounded in the understanding of existing vulnerabilities, pre-disaster kinship ties, pre-disaster social structures, pre-disaster discriminations and exclusions that are in place, which prevent unequal access to resources in the disaster and post-disaster events. And it also, they are deeply intersectional, and they kind of come from the point of our existing social roles. A simple question, women provide caregiving in the home and familial environment. So what does this mean in time of evacuation? They will be looking to evacuate with their children, with the elderly in the family, and so on, things like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you all through the what I'm calling the gendered images of disaster. Some evidences from the field, disaster researchers and gender theorists have kind of identified, as Dr. Walia said, the monumental suffering of women in the wake of disasters and crises. We have to acknowledge that there is a differential vulnerability for all genders. We are not saying that others are not vulnerable. We are saying that there is a differential vulnerability, and we have to understand the differential nature of this vulnerability. So let me give you all some examples. For example, in any flooding situation, and in the 2004 tsunami, which came to light, more women and girl children were died, and there was a higher disaster mortality because they are unable to swim. The survival skills such as swimming is not imparted to women because there are patriarchal impositions of modesty. In a rural area, you will not find girls in groups going to swim in the village pond or the village or in their lake, because they're not allowed to go and do that, whereas you'll find boys doing that. So they don't have the skill. So in flooding situations, they are more susceptible to mortality. And this is from our own study in 2008, when relief is getting distributed, men and boys will be able to wade into the water and procure what they want. But girl children, elderly, women, the vulnerable groups get left behind. The question of reproductive health care post-flooding is important because of the way our anatomies are. Flood water seeps into our bodies, and it carries debris and waste, and there's a risk of infection. So what is the reproductive health care in the post-disaster, especially a flooding situation? And we've seen evidences of large-scale trafficking and bonded labor post-disasters, right? And there are lots of examples: restrictive clothing, and which communities are more susceptible to mortalities, toilets, sanitary towels, innerwear, when relief materials are distributed. Is it gender aware relief materials? Are you just, what are you, when you're creating a relief kit, there has to be some gender awareness that goes into the creation of that relief kit. Very often relief is rooted through traditional mediums such as panchayats and kap panchayats, and it's very difficult to women to go into the public sphere and access such relief. Further, sometimes it's given in the name of a man, and there are extreme intra-household inequalities and so on. So what is due to a woman and girl children often doesn't come to them. In questions of earthquakes, for example, women, because of the demarcation of the public and private sphere, women are indoors, and the buildings collapse on them. This is the And because they don't have access to early warning information, they don't have mobile phones. Very often there might be just one mobile phone or one electronic device at home, and it's controlled by the man, so they don't get access to early warning information. In other parts of the world, if women are responsible for procuring water for household water management, and it's a woman's job to go and get water. And if there's a slow onset disaster like droughts, the labor is very high. Women's labor to do this work is very high. We've already spoken about compensation and sexual assaults. And I want to acknowledge the differential vulnerability of men and women. This, sometimes men are asked to man up and prove that they are stronger and put themselves in risky situations to sort of save others and so on. So we have to, the pitch is we have to understand that different genders in the plural, transgenders, women, men, girls, children, across the gender spectrum, different genders are differentially vulnerable, and we have to integrate this into our disaster risk reduction initiatives. I want to give the example of climate change. The marginal and women are least likely to contribute to climate change and carbon emissions, but they're the most likely to suffer from the negative and adverse impacts of climate change. So those are the questions we need to be cognizant of. So I've spoken about several of these factors, risk of domestic violence and so on, and their existing social vulnerabilities, existing literacy rates, because there's a myth that disasters are great equalizers. That's not true. It rests on a foundation of existing marginalizations and exclusions and discrimination, and we have to take into account the existing vulnerabilities. For example, when women are displaced, or when families are displaced, women are expected to set up homes in refugee camps because they are expected to recreate the familial environment, and they are least likely to own assets in their own name. And if you look at various studies, the ActionAid study that I'm referring to here, there is any disaster or any crisis reveals the dirty underbelly of society, and there's a increase in child marriage, increase in domestic violence, increase in trafficking, increase in feticides. So there is a backlash which is very, very gendered in nature that we have to take into account while doing any kind of disaster risk reduction. So this is the foundation. So this is a little diagram on how we look at any form of integrating gender into our DRR. So we have a hazard, right? A hazard is any source of potential harm. And we have to take into account different vulnerabilities to be exposed to this hazard. So a good disaster risk practice should consider gender dynamics into its policy making. And women in particular face barriers to access information, to access resources, and even receipt of early warning and so on. So this is the background which we need to keep in mind. There are some hands going up. The question answers will be later on. We can't, I apologize, we can't take questions at this point. Sorry, I kind of stopped sharing. I hope you can see it again. So we need to understand the existing social vulnerabilities which get exposed in post-disaster contexts. So vulnerabilities are multidimensional, right? So we have to look at the different dimensions of vulnerability: economic, social, ecological, education, cultural. These are the different, I mean, I put it on the slide, these are the different dimensions. women don't have access to critical resources. The money at home is controlled often by men. Literacy, when I talk about social, I'm talking about literacy rates, I'm talking about the patriarchal impositions on honor and modesty and different demands on women and girl children to perform their femininity. Ecological, so how does the degradation of the environment and the natural resource base, what does it do to subsistence livelihoods? What does it do to women who, perhaps have a kitchen garden? What does it do to that? Those questions. We already spoke about educational, cultural, we need permission to leave the house and so on. So the different vulnerabilities at stake, and women are not part of political power and are not representative in decision-making bodies enough. They're not represented enough in decision-making bodies. So these are all of these contribute to our vulnerability. So this is the literacy rate, were the tenor put up over there. So if you can see, the female literacy rate is lower, it's increasing, but it's lower. So the question we are asking is, if it's lower, it has implications for early warnings. If you have an illiterate group and you're warning them about flooding or earthquake or a cyclone or any kind of disaster risk, can they read it? So if they can't read it, then how are you communicating? Are you using different methods and mechanisms to communicate disaster risk, right? So these aspects are very important. Again, access to health. You can see the data, different social stratification keep different social groups from accessing health. There are barriers to health care. So post-disaster is all about how strong a health infrastructure is and how inclusive it is for different groups of people. So this has to be strengthened. So we sit on a foundation of existing problems, and these get exacerbated in disaster contexts. So that's the question. So again, these are the gender-based violence statistics, right? So there is an existing bleak picture of crimes against women, rapes and assaults and kidnappings and abductions and cruelty. And all of these become amplified in post-disaster situations. As we can see, if you recently saw the England Euro Cup, England-Italy match, and there was a increase in the domestic violence post the match because England lost, and there is a lot of studies that look at how when certain national teams lose, there's a lot of anger and it gets taken out at home. So all of these are reminders that we have to keep in mind when we look at disaster intervention. So this is the increase across the world. It's being called the shadow pandemic. I think Professor Patel will talk a little bit more about this increase in domestic violence worldwide. It's not just India, worldwide, when national lockdowns were announced, because people, women especially, were locked in with their abusers. Yeah, so it's quite bleak. So we have economic exclusions in place. So India has one of the lowest female workforce participation. That means not enough resources on their own, in their own name. They don't own assets, they don't have bank accounts in their own name, and women's labor is concentrated in the informal sector. So think about it. So post disaster, when there is a big disruption, when there is a big devastation of everything that we own dear to us, and you don't have assets, you don't have money, and you're dependent on the male member of the family for basic survival. And if the male member has died, what do you do? So there are a lot of questions this throws up. So we have to take into account existing social vulnerabilities, and this is the political participation. Why is this important? This is the number of women in the Lok Sabha. So this is 2014. 2019, it went up to about 14%. So this is important because we don't have enough lawmakers making laws representative of women's voices. So in bodies, of course, we have the Panchayati Raj and the 73rd and 74th constitutional amendments, which mandates 33% for women in local bodies, yes, but at a more national level, when we are looking at crisis and disasters, we need more representative voices, and this is the state of political participation. So my point here is, across the social, economic, and political dimensions, we are underrepresented, exceptionally vulnerable, and these have to be taken into account when you are planning any kind of disaster risk reduction intervention or post-disaster intervention, or when you're talking about resilience building or talking about resilience is, well, one thing, but just coping with the existing, your resources are taken away, you don't have resources, how will you cope? And adaptation, how will you adapt to change and adapt to a changing dynamic environment? So we want to look at it in the context of sustainability, because it's part of something you're talking about. Sustainable development, we're saying, is intergenerational equity, right? So that is, you are uh, uh, needs of the present are being met without compromising on the ability of the future generation to meet their own needs. This is from the Brunswick report. Now, what are these needs? Let's look at what do we mean by these needs that are being met. So access to food, education, income generating activities, access to housing. So everywhere women and gender minorities and girl children are lagging behind in these indicators. So we have the sustainable development goals. We have national programs that aim to alleviate the position of girls, gender minorities, women. And we have the goal number 5, which is to achieve gender equality. But there are a lot of aspects that continue to persist, which is gender-based violence. Sorry, I was muted and I had to come back. So we have to look at sustainability and gender as a larger question with the ability to kind of maintain, meet needs. And in this context, if we have to talk about resilience building, basically, what do we mean by resilience building? It's, my slide. How does a community, a person, a society, or individual bounce back, absorb the effects of disaster, recover, resist it, and bounce back in a timely and efficient manner? And to be able to bounce back, to be able to absorb the shocks and stresses, to be able to recover from the effects of something so bad, our existing systems have to be strengthened. Our existing indicators and social status and economic status and political participation, ability to be in decision-making bodies, all of these have to be strengthened. We have to take into account intersectional identities of caste, class, ethnicity, religion, disability, age, different burdens on the identity, and then talk about resilience building. Right? So what are the differential interventions you'll do to different communities? Community is not a homogeneous entity. There are young children, there are elderly, there are people from religious minorities, ethnic minorities. So how do you look at the differential needs and vulnerabilities of these different groups? And then, because everyone's ability to cope with a disaster and absorb it and recover are highly different, right? So this is from the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. One of the priorities is to enhance disaster preparedness and build back better. So women have to be integrated into community responses, have to be their participation has to be strengthened, their contribution has to be recognized. And as was rightly pointed out by Dr. Walia earlier, women are doing a lot at the community level. These have to be recognized. So, and they should be given more resources, more opportunities to participate even more. Yes. So on that note, we need to mainstream gender into the disaster risk reduction process. And on that note, I want to end my presentation. And I thank you all for the opportunity to talk to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Lavanya ma'am. Thank you so much for such a thought-provoking and a valuable session of yours. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you very much. With your permission, I'll hand over to Dr. Vibhuti Patel, and I apologize to all the participants that I have to leave. But Doctor, you're in able hands. Dr. Patel is very well versed in this, and she's fantastic. And it's over to her. Thank you, everyone. I will thank you to all the
Thank you,
participants.
ma'am.
My
Thank you
apologies.
so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Yeah. Just set the ball rolling. So
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. I'll see you soon. Yeah. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Lavanya ma'am. Now we will proceed to our next session of the day, that is gender impact with special reference to COVID-19 by Dr. Vibhuti Patel madam. May I now request Ms. Jayashree Lokhande, member of WDC, to introduce Dr. Vibhuti Patel madam to us. Over to you, Jayesh.
Good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes.
yes.
Okay. So now I would like to introduce our mentor, guide, and philosopher,
Jayashree, you are
Vibhuti
mute.
Patel madam. No. Am I audible now?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. Okay. Sorry. Good afternoon. Once again, I would like to introduce our mentor, guide, and philosopher of WDC, Dr. Vibhuti Patel madam. Madam is superannuated from Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai on 30 June 2020. She has done PhD in economics from University of Mumbai. She worked at Advanced Center for Women's Studies, School of Development Studies, Tata Institute of Social Sciences after her superannuation from SNDT Women's University. She has authored and co-authored 12 books, 34 research monographs and reports, and contributed over 100 papers as chapters in various books. She has awarded visiting fellowship to the London School of Economics and Political Science from the Association of Commonwealth Universities, UK in 1992-93. Also, Madam is a member of editorial board of various national and international journals. We welcome you, ma'am. Now, I will request Madam to start the session. Thank you, ma'am. Over to you.
Good afternoon, all. First of all, I would like to express my heartfelt thanks to Major Kumar Bindal and Dr. Lily Bhushan for giving me this opportunity. Dr. Anjali Walia, she set this tone, and I am really thankful to her for taking this initiative. And Lavanya has set the ball rolling. The organizing team, Dr. Vanita, Professor Shamita Sengupta, Professor Vaishali Oza, Professor Jayashree Lokhande, who have been in touch with me over last 1 month. And I'm thankful to them also. The topic given to me is a gender and disaster management. So I think that it was announced some other different, the topic given to me was gender and climate change. So my PPT is on gender. Yeah, can I share the screen? Yeah. Yeah. So should I have a full screen? Will it be possible? Yeah. Are you able to see? Excuse me?
Not yet, ma'am.
Not yet.
Huh? No?
Not yet.
Yes,
Now
yes,
it is
yes, it's visible.
Yeah, ma'am. It's
Visible, no? Yeah. Yeah. So the previous two speakers have already spoken about the dimension of gender equality, climate change, and sustainable development goals. So we all know that Sustainable Development Goals, there are 17 important goals. Before that, we had Millennium Development Goals. There were 8 goals, and goal number 3 was about empowerment of women. While in Sustainable Development Goals, goal number 5 is on gender equality. And whatever were the limitations of Millennium Development Goal, for example, it did not talk about gender-based violence in the beginning, but now in Sustainable Development Goal, it is also taken up very seriously, and there is also an approach of gender mainstreaming. What Lavanya, the last slide of Lavanya talked about, that why we need to integrate gender in each and every discourse, because every issue is a woman's issue, or every issue is a gender issue. You just can't say that gender issue can wait and we will tackle the other mainstream issue. So mainstreaming is very important, whether you are talking of poverty or hunger or health or quality of education or economic situation, environmental issues, legal reforms. Everywhere we need to bring in the gender concerns. Now, the discourse on gender climate change, we see that and sustainable development, first of all, we need to have a conceptual clarity about what do we mean by sustainable development. Lavanya rightly aspirations of the current generation without compromising the ability of those future generation. Our children and grandchildren should not say that our parents and grandparents generation, they consumed so much from Mother Earth that they did not leave anything on this planet. That should not happen. So we need to follow those kind of macro policies, meso policies, and micro level, our day-to-day life and household level strategies in such a way that we don't take more than what we give to Mother Nature. Another very important concept we need to understand is the human development approach towards sustainable development. Because many of you who are from commerce and management and all must be knowing about human capital formation. Everyone talks about social capital, financial capital, human capital. Now, in that, the approach is that you generate human capital so that it will return high growth and efficiency and $5 trillion economy and all. But when you talk about human development, you are talking about entitlement of a person. Right? It is a right-based approach. Right to food, right to dignity, right to education, right to health. All these are now are the concerns of human development approach. So it is a development which enables individuals and communities or in the developing countries to raise living standards through just trade. Just trade is that you are not exploiting. You know that throughout the colonial period, okay, of 200 years, or in Africa for 500 years, there was a slavery. Trade was happening, economic activities were happening, but it only benefited, it was a one-sided benefited with the colonial rulers got it. So we don't want that kind of exploitative trade. We want a just trade, non-exploitative product pricing. If you are just always, you say that industrial products are very expensive, while the agrarian product, we won't pay anything. It's so much so that farmers will commit suicide. Not only in India, in so many countries, farmers are committing suicide. Why? Because only at the time of harvest, prices crash. Farmers can't recover even the cost of production of their price. I have seen places in Wayanad where tribal women, they work day and night for a coffee plantation. And when their coffee seeds are ready, prices crash. Who is the price maker? Nestle is the price maker. Multinational corporation, transnational corporations are the price makers, while the people who are slogging, they don't. So this kind of a non-exploitative product pricing we want. Production which should be in such a way that it minimizes adverse environmental effect. If you just contaminate rivers, if you take away the soil quality, if you release your effluent in the air, which creates tremendous pollution. There was a time where we used to call chamber a gas chamber, okay, because there was so much of pollution and the poisonous gases which came out from the fertilizer plant, RCF. And then a lot of actions were taken by Environment Ministry. So the current discourse when we talk about climate change or disaster management is growth versus employment. Growth for the sake of growth, that is not at this thing. Human well-being, development. What are the indicators of development? They are education, health, skill development, employment, overall well-being of the people. So Agenda 13 of the United Nations, it urges to take action to combat climate change and its impact. Climate change is now affecting every country in the continent. Even in last 15 months of the pandemic, Maharashtra experienced Nisarg. In Bengal, we had a flooding. In Sundarbans, every year floods, they devastate hundreds of villages. We currently, Bangladesh faced this, Orissa faced cyclone. So this kind of a climate change and the frequency of this kind of change, climate changes and the devastating impact have increased. So it is disrupting national economies and affecting lives, costing people, communities, countries dearly today and even tomorrow. So many examples were given by our first speaker and also by Lavanya. So Dr. Ajinder Walia also gave several examples of COVID-19 pandemic and Lavanya spoke about various droughts and floods and earthquake and COVID-19 pandemic and the kind of devastation it caused. So what we talk about when we see the connection of climate change and sustainable development and disaster, first important thing is intergenerational justice. She also talked about that intergenerational equality and equity should not be violated, should not be compromised. Intergenerational justice through economic growth, ecological sustainability, empowerment of the marginalized. Lavanya talked about all the gender minorities. She talked about the minorities, Dalits, tribal, ethnic minorities, people who are poor, who are in the informal sector. So that's very important. And it has to be bottom-up decision-making, people's participation in decision-making. To some extent, it has happened through Panchayati Raj institution that we have 50% of reservation for women in Panchayati Raj institution in more than 20 states in our country. And except for 2 states, Kashmir and Nagaland, all other states are implementing 33% minimum 33% representation of women in Panchayati Raj institutions. Everyone is talking about COVID warriors and everyone is talking about the heroic role which the doctors, nurses, ayabais and ASHA workers in the National Rural Health Mission have done. But not much is being said about the heroic work done by women elected representatives in municipal corporations, municipal councils, Jilla Panchayat and village level committees, and also the role played by self-help groups in the midst of this pandemic. So we need to go through the deeper structural parameters. What are the ownership? Because Lavanya said that we have different kind of assets. So those who have assets, they manage the disaster. They can negotiate the hardship of disaster better. But those who are totally assetless poor, they are at the receiving end. Cultural value. She gave so many examples. The dress code. At the time of tsunami, women were wearing saris, while men were in shorts. They could easily swim. Tsunami waves, they just created more complications for women. So many women got drowned because their sari got entangled in the waves. So even cultural values, even in the relief, because I remember the relief work at the time of tsunami, when the different races were given. People, villagers, they refused to wear salwar kameez or they refused to wear t-shirt and all because the cultural norms are such that women have to wear only sari. That is there. So another thing is that the whole mode of production and the growth trajectory and where are women in the economy. So intertemporal individual freedoms are very important. Interpersonal individual freedoms are what level of freedom and autonomy you have. Like even in the midst of so much of gender-based violence, women can't think of running around, especially in the lockdown, because while counseling, I work on a helpline for gender-based violence, and this woman says that where do I go? If I go, there is a one bear in my house who is hitting me, and if I go, there will be hundreds of them because the life outside is so insecure. At the time of disaster, there is so much of insecurity. So the question of gender equality and gender justice become extremely important. Inequalities are based in our society on caste, ethnicity, class, gender, and in this inequalities, as Lavanya said, gets exacerbated at the time of any kind of environmental crisis or climate change. Now, who depletes forest resources? We always criminalize the tribal people. In our country, we have 11% of the population, which is a scheduled caste population. They depend on the forest resources, and tribal women are always criminalized because they are supposed to be quote unquote stealing wood. But nobody talks about that how tribal women also nurture the forest. They have a symbiotic relationship with the forest. Nobody talks about, nobody points fingers at the timber mafia, which is in a massive way is creating havoc. It was in 1972 that women in Chamoli, in Tehri Garhwal, who recently in last 3 years has faced tremendous devastation. Even recently, this year also, it faced devastation. It gets flooded even in summer because the snow in Himalaya melts and it floods. And in monsoon also, tremendous floods and devastation. Even the place from where Chipko movement started, that has also been, that whole village has been destroyed in this devastation. Why did it happen? Who denuded Himalaya? Okay, so the question of what kind of forest laws we have and who do we side, when it comes to destruction of environment. These are the women who said way back in 72 that aap Himalaya ko nanga kar rahe hain, you are raping Himalaya and it's going to cause tremendous disaster. At that time only, women approached Gandhian leader Sundarlal Bahuguna, who passed away just last month, and a lot of obituaries you must have read in the newspapers, how they call him environment man. And they say there's 7 types of destructions which were created because of denuding of Himalaya. The water tables were going down. Women had to, women in Himalaya, they are responsible for collection of fuel, fodder, water, animal care, kitchen gardening. They were not finding any resources because the denuding of forest. Secondly, landslides had increased because the forest and plants and roots, they also keep the land in a solid way. The moment trees go away, the whole vagaries of nature, it also creates tremendous destruction. So villages after villages got destroyed. Their crops were ruined. Women, men who were given cash, daily wages by the timber merchants, they were given wages in one hand and bottle of alcohol in another. So recently you must have seen several interviews that anti-alcohol movement in Himalayan valleys is spearheaded every year by the women's organizations and local women, because it creates tremendous devastation. If man earns 80 rupees for felling the tree, he will be buying alcohol worth 100 rupees, and he'll be indebted to the same contractor who would force this man that give your virgin daughter for a red light area. And that's how the trafficking of women from Himalayan valleys that become, you must have seen Raj Kapoor's movie Barsat at that time, right from that time, the commercial sex activities, and how the people from the plains, they use this women. Suicide rate of women increase because daily survival, women don't get, like when they go hunting for water or fuel or fodder for animal, they don't get it anything from one hill to other hill, and women would just jump out of the hill and they start, and that's how the incidences of women's suicide increase. So this kind of 7 types of disaster, these women say that, look, this is not Vikas, this is Vinash. It is not development, it is disaster. Imagine way back in 1972, these women had predicted what kind of climate crisis that we are going to create. Another thing is about that forest land, the way forest land is being taken in the name of development. And we have seen heroic struggle of women in several parts of a country, whether it was in Sindhudurg, spearheaded by leader like Ulka Mahajan and Vaishali Patil, or in Nandigram in Singapore, where there was a very, very bloodbath took place because the villagers, they opposed Tata Nano plant coming in that fertile land. In Maharashtra, it did not happen because there was a democratic process and open discussions took place with Reliance and the people, farmers, because they said that in what way the special economic zone in Ratnagiri, Sindhudurg would benefit the local people, because in any case in Ratnagiri and Sindhudurg, they get water throughout the year. They take 3 crops. The best Alfonso mango comes from there. And they said in what way will this special economic zone, which will take away our hundreds of villages, is going to benefit the village? You show us, you convince us whether we are going to get better quality of life or not. And Maharashtra government said, okay, you negotiate. We are not going to use bullet. Let people discuss. And finally, Reliance, and the discussion did not happen in closed door. They happened open. Thousands of farmers and the executives, there were CCTV cameras, big screens, and a discussion took place in Marathi and translations were taking place in Hindi. So this is that we can find solution to any kind of such damage that is happening to our environment. So the economic issues, so social issues, I think Lavanya spoke at length about what are the kind of vulnerabilities that you have: economic vulnerability, social vulnerability, environmental vulnerability. And all these issues were tabled in Rio conference, Rio +20 conference on the sustainable development. Rio conference was in a way, watershed. It was a landmark because there was it was the rich countries who were just blaming population bomb of the poor countries, while the poor countries were saying that, look, it is your consumerist lifestyle. One Bangladeshi child, one American child consumes resources which are equivalent to 200 Bangladeshi children. Okay, so just talk about your lifestyle. Think about changing your consumerist lifestyle, which believes in use and throw culture. While we don't do that, we don't use cup and throw it. We have a metal cup, we wash it, we use it for generations. Okay, I also have utensils from my grandmother's time. Okay, so this is what a lot of tutu meme took place, lot of polemics took place, and finally the whole after nearly 20 years of negotiation, they say that, look, you can't talk about population versus development. It has to be population and development. You have to invest in your population. So vast renewable energy potential that could help in responding to the scenario. So let us use the science and technology to create better quality of life for women. And also policy and financial measures to quickly make the technologies available and accessible to poor, have a decentralized hydro plants instead of a big dam, which create the moment dam burst. They create, must have seen Satyam Sivam Sundaram, no, by Raj Kapoor, the last scene where the dam bursts. What happens? Massive destruction that takes place. Why should we have a very long-standing culture in our India, in our country for hundreds of years? Indians have used step well. Okay, wow. In Gujarat they call it. In Rajasthan you have wow. You have a pukur in every household in Bengal. You have in Kerala also. You can see the water bodies within the household, rainwater harvesting, the whole culture of rainwater harvesting, which our ancestors have taught us. So this kind of thing, and how the organizations like Mazdoor Kisan Sangram Samiti in Rajasthan, or a Waterman of India who got Maxase Award, Mr. Singh, he also, they are the ones who have created water security in a desert land of Rajasthan. So recycle, reuse, and reduce the wastage. These are the approaches which are promoted by those who believe in sustainable development. Now, coming to gender concerns in climate change, like women in many developing countries are responsible for climatically sensitive work, such as securing food, especially, in fact, if you see throughout Asia, rice cultivation is, women are there majorly. There are so many books written on women in rice cultivation, Muddy Feet and Dirty Hands by John Mincher, Shardamani and all. They show that the contribution of women in this thing. Plus collection of water is women's responsibility. There is an economist, Indira Rajaraman. She has done the time use analysis, which shows that on an average, poor Indian woman spends 6.2 years of her life in just collecting water. Okay, so we are privileged in city like Mumbai or in Delhi or Calcutta. We get tapped water in our own flat. Okay, but there are women who have to walk for miles together for one pitcher of water. Okay, so this is the kind of energy expenditure which takes place, and now we have 60%. Latest NFHS study shows 60% of Indian women are anemic. Okay, because they spend what they get in terms of nutrition is less than what they spend in terms of their energy. So effects of climate change and drought, floods, coastal erosion, sea level rise, rising temperature, because recently you must have seen in last 1 week in Times of India, I think 2 or 3 articles have come up about the heat. He says heat, the question of rising temperature is not a neutral climatic issue. There are people, poor people are more sufferer. They are going to lose more when the temperature rises. They are the ones who have water shortage. They are the ones who live in a tin shade. They are the ones who don't have a air conditioning facility. So even when the temperature rises, it has a differential impact on different sections of society. And they put greater pressure on women to shoulder adverse consequences of the household. So all the learnings of women in the 70s are very important. So this is one very sketch made by an artist about the Chipko movement. This was Chipko movement, where the women who were in the Himalayan valleys, they fought heroically against commercial vested interest, which exploits forest resources and forest dwellers. They were supported by Sundarlal Bahuguna. When the Tehri Dam was to be created, that is the time also these women, they told that if the Tehri Dam comes up, all the villages in the lower part are going to be destroyed. No? So this, and that's what happened also. We did not listen to these women's advice, and what happened is every year we see such disasters. Now, women, they spend a lot of time in terms of, and as Lavanya said, that women don't have as much access to information and resources. They are underrepresented in decision-making bodies. And despite women's vulnerabilities, they use the traditional knowledge and social practices to build the community resilience. Because any time, like we saw even under the COVID pandemic, when people within 1 month of pandemic and lockdown, most of the migrant workers in the cities like Mumbai, where 60% workers are migrant workers, in most of the 10 major cities in India, you have around 55 to 60% migrant workers. They were homeless. But when the community kitchens were started, these women were the ones who took over. Even though they were homeless, they were resourceless, the way they managed the crisis, because in the shelter homes, there were no doctors, there were no nurses, nobody, whole health system was overworked. So they were the ones who were looking after each other and who were providing support to each other, who were supporting the social workers and civil society organizations which were there. So they did not behave like a victim, even when they were, because they lost everything, right from their utensils to gas stoves or this thing. When they vacated the house, everything they gave, they just started walking without anything. They took only their children and started walking. Some people who were disabled, some people who were very old, they looked after them also while walking back hundreds and thousands of miles during the pandemic. So we have seen that women have and this is what shows, and that's why on 8th March, I think your college, or the KES Shroff College also had a very important webinar that let us build back better and take women's opinion and collective wisdom into consideration regarding all the decisions regarding a fuel, fodder, water, livestock raising, kitchen gardening, and ensure women's land rights. Currently, there is an organization called MAKAM, Mahila Kisan Adhikar Manch, which is active in 18 states of India. They say that it's very important for women to get, because women are less commercial, they would not go for commercial crop at the cost of subsistence crop. So food, fruit, vegetables, cereals, fruits are very seasonal fruits are very important to women. They will not go for any kind of a commercial crop. Even if they are lured by the corporate houses, they say first topmost priority. And same thing has happened in Africa also. It was the women who said the we want money, but not at the cost of starving our people. Okay, so that has been the now, impact of climate change on women are not a mainstream focus in the international agreement on climate change, like a Kyoto Protocol or United Nations Framework for Convention on Climate Change, or even all key decision-making institutions in the world. So all the instruments that we have globally, they are not, because most of them are male-dominated. There are hardly, even in the current crisis, as Madam Dr. Ajinder Valia told, it's out of 204 countries, only 18 countries have women head of the state. And all these 18 countries, they were the first one to mitigate the negative effect of coronavirus because they put people before profit. All the macroeconomic policies, public health policies, immediate intervention. These 18 women leaders from Nordic countries, from Germany, New Zealand, Taiwan, all of them, they say that first priority of the country is to save people's life, and that's why they put the system in place, whether it was a vaccination or detection or contact tracing or isolation or creation of COVID centers. They were the ones who put in nation's resources, taxpayers' money into that as a priority, and they contained a pandemic. So it is very important to have a women in the decision-making body. We have also seen in the European Union, after 40% reservation of women parliamentarians in the European Union, the agenda of European Union has changed. There are a lot of people-oriented, community-oriented concerns which they have shown. Coming to the women in the forest economy, like what women are demanding, women farmers, women forest dwellers, community workers, all of them they are saying that in any kind of implement, forests are important, trees are very, very important to combat the negative implications of global warming, and they are the ones who are playing very important, pivotal role. So organizations like Makam, they are asking for land to the tiller, protect women farmers, priority to subsistence production, food and nutrition security, agrarian product pricing, which should not be damaging to the farmers' interest. Otherwise, they'll commit suicide. We have old history of since 1991. We have thousands of farmers, even in the prosperous states like Punjab and Haryana, they've committed suicide because of the volatility in the agricultural prices, and how to create the sustainable farming practices. There are so many best practices. Women's clusters have come up with in Bundelkhand, in Deccan Development Region, DDA, then projects supported by Tata Trust. So Indian women are extremely vulnerable to climate change. Women are often responsible for providing essentials such as food and water for and also climate resilience they provide at the time of disaster. The studies by the London School of Economics have also shown that during drought and flood, like throughout the whole history, there is so many historians have studied, like Vidyut Mohanty and all, they have studied droughts in Orissa. And they said that during the 70s, in all droughts, 19% of the women were less likely, girls were less likely to go to school. So anytime there is a disaster, because the disaster demands more labor, whether it is in terms of survival needs or whether it is in terms of people who have been affected, who have become ill. So it is women girls who are pulled out of school. So climate change intensifies India's poorest women and girls' risk of losing opportunities to participate equally in development. Currently, as Dr. Ajinder told us that more than so many, in India alone, 1 crore girls are out of school in the corona pandemic, and the associated corollaries of forced marriage, child marriage, trafficking of girls, forced child labor, that also happens. So many poor women are involved in a climate sensitive activities such as paddy cultivation or even fishing. Women fisher folks over the last 15 months have suffered the most because they don't have refrigeration facility. They don't have a tempo or any vehicle. what they do is they collect one basket full of fish and do door-to-door selling. The lockdown is the one who lockdown affected fish vendors. And who are the fish vendors? Mostly women. They are the ones whose livelihoods were affected negatively. So the report, which was prepared by the UNFPA, which says that facing the changing world, uh, women, population, and climate change, which was released in 2009, where the report asks a very pertinent question: that with the possibility of climate catastrophe on the horizon, can we afford to relegate world's 3.4 billion women, that means 34 crore women and girls, role as a victim, or shouldn't we consider make them as change agents? Women are not the victims alone; they are the change agents of the at the time of any disaster. In Asian countries, we have seen that about 2.2 billion Asians, they rely on agriculture. Most of the Asian countries are dependent on agriculture. So current climate models indicate food price may increase. And currently we have seen that though people's purchasing power has reduced, that the questions which economists are asking, and you must be reading those articles in Economic Times, and you must be seeing those videos. Dr. Arun Kumar has done an analysis that in last 15 months, because people lost livelihood and they did not have purchasing power, demand has gone down. Still, why are prices of essential food items not going down? Okay, so which are the factors who is benefiting the most? And the new term that we are talking about is a pandemic profiteers. So even in the midst of pandemic, there are companies which are really profiting. They are getting assuming a level of extremely high level of profits. The women's produce 50% of world's food grown in worldwide. Food and Agricultural Organization also declared that future of food security and food sovereignty lies with women. Okay, in India, more than 84% are involved in agriculture. Now it has reduced to, because in last couple of years, it has reduced because there is a defeminization in agriculture also. But gender inequality makes them disproportionately vulnerable to environmental alterations. And that's why it is predicted that climate change will lead to increasing frequency and intensity of the extreme weather conditions and natural disasters around the globe. And London School of Economics study also shows that in natural disasters which occurred in 145 countries between 1981 and 2002, the women and children, they were the most affected, they were adversely. 85% of women who die from disaster are women. 70 to 80% of casualties in 2004 tsunami were women. 90% of casualties in 1991 cyclone, Bangladesh cyclone, you must have seen those devastating photographs. Maybe those who are young, they may not be knowing much, but we have seen extremely heartrending and horrifying photographs during that cyclone, the devastation. So 90% of the casualties happened to women. 83% of low income and single mothers were displaced in the wake of Hurricane Katrina. So about Katrina, I think many would know because it happened quite recently. So increased vulnerability and the work burden of this thing, which several documentations of in Africa have also shown that how this kind of women's labor increases exponentially when the climate change takes place and natural disasters take place. Another thing is that women have the kind of ownership of assets, whether it is equipments or land or house or property, women don't have it. And that multiplies their vulnerability, as Lavanya also told us. So it is in this context that women, eco-feminists, women in environmental movement, they are asking that whether you are talking of, say, deforestation or big dams or industrialization or that creates pollution, or sand mafia, which is creating the disaster in the riverbeds, or forest laws which criminalize tribal women and children, or industrial pollution, which is also has a negative externality. Where do women go? What does this kind of a development has to offer to a poor, hardworking woman? So this is the question, which is very, very mind-boggling to all of us. Now, women's representation and women's agenda-setting power, they are extremely important because collective wisdom of women, right from the time of like whether it is a Green Belt movement started by Wangari Maathai, professor of botany of Nairobi University. She challenged the agro-business and she said that hunger in Africa is not created by Africans. Africa has enough land. There is no pressure on land. In fact, 500 years of slavery had taken heavy toll of African population, but it is the wrong policy, pressurizing poor African countries to go for commercial crop, where the subsistence crop of Africa, which is a makkah, maize, which is a complete food, because Africans make most of the right from the bread to porridge and everything is made of, and it's a high protein food. And lakhs of acres, thousands of lakhs of acres of land, which were where the farmers were forced to cultivate cocoa or coffee, strawberry, pineapple for the agro-business of the Western countries. That created hunger in Africa. And for saying that, she was called mad, she was imprisoned. It was in 1985, and the end of the decade, you know that 1975 was an International Women's Year, United Nations declared it. 1975 to 85 were International Women's Decade. And end of the decade conference was in Nairobi, and it was the women delegates who went for this conference. They put the condition before the United Nations that only after Wangari Maathai was released, they would allow conference to happen. And finally, Wangari Maathai was released. In fact, by then she became a superstar as an orator. She is an excellent speaker, very well documented, very well researched botany professor. She got award as a Nobel Peace Award. And after that, she started moving to all 56 African countries, traveling, and she created a model farm. I have visited that model farm in 85. And in this was Green Belt movement. And she told African farmers that don't compromise your food sovereignty to the agribusiness. Food for your children is more important. Fruits of this, that is very, and Green Belt movement became very, very powerful in African countries, and the Africa started focusing on food sovereignty and food security, that we don't need long queues of people waiting for soup kitchens, because that's what the Western world has created with the Hollywood and all. They had created a lot of, so many hunger projects came up and soup kitchens were started. So anyone can walk in and you get bread and soup. No? So they said, why should we depend on this food? We farmers are hardworking, subsistence production rests on the shoulder of women, and we should never compromise that. So compounding this reality of widespread gender inequities existing throughout the policy and decision-making spheres, leaving women to struggle against restricted access to information and education, restricted mobility, because most of the societies, as Lavanya also said, that you have to be homebound. Public life is in the hands of men, and women have to be in the private domain. So, and also the laws restricting or prohibiting land ownership to women. Most of the countries don't have land. In fact, the traditional land ownership rights, which are customary laws, India has 30,000 customary laws. But when the customary laws were codified into family laws by the British administrators, there is strong male bias, because the British officers, they gave all the rights to men, which earlier, so many communities, so many castes, so many had a traditional customary rights to women. They were snatched away. And currently there are 3 important public petitions are there in Supreme Court of India. One by the tribal women in Maharashtra, Buribai and Dagibai from Akkal Kuwa in Nandurbar. They have filed. Another one is in Singapore, Jharkhand, Laro Janko, another tribal woman. They have said that traditional land rights of women should be ensured in the new this thing. So and the similar sentiments you see also in several African countries and other Asian countries, Asia, even Philippines, there is a strong farm movement. So women are producing 60% of food in Asia, 80% of food in Africa, yet women have access to only 1% of agriculture credit worldwide. So our financial institutions are also male dominated. They would not mind giving maybe billions of dollars to a fugitive who would run away and stock his money in Mauritius or tax havens or some secret bank. But they would not give women, when women ask for loan, they said you are not credit worthy. You don't have collateral. So this is the biases you have even in the financial. So you remain in the microfinance, 5,000 rupees to 50,000 rupees, enough. Women can't get more than, even women entrepreneurs, if you see in our country, only 9% of entrepreneurs are women, and their capital is maximum 2 lakhs, between 50,000 to 2 lakhs. So that is the, in fact, when two students of mine have done study on women entrepreneurs, and they are, you can't, because they don't get any job, they start running a food stall and you call them entrepreneur. So that is a very, it is important to reconstruct all these macro phenomena that are happening. Now in Uganda, the women say that we travel further and further for firewood every year. It takes us to less safe places. What Lavanya said, the question of safety. When you walk for miles together to get one pitcher of water or some 5 kg of firewood or grass for your domestic animals, it is also unsafe. You are lonely. Okay, most of the cases of sexual violence and kidnap happen there. Deforestation in Uganda amplifies already dire condition. Local women's groups they address the problem by planting evergreen mango trees to replace one cut down by fewer. So when women take firewood, women also plant trees. Okay, we need to note that you just can't always criminalize tribal women for taking away fire. Deforestation happens more by the bigger players like timber lobby or other mafia, which is the furniture mafia. It is not done, the damage is not done by women. It's very important lesson. We need to come out of our middle class bias. Another thing is that the discrimination against women also plays an enormous role in how women experience the effect of climate change. Like when women have seen their crop yields cut in half and quality of grain diminish because of climate changes, women's health is impaired because women are the one who eat last, least leftover. So wherever there is a food shortage, you must have seen Satyajit Ray's movie, no, on drought. You use the woman, who she even when she doesn't have anything, she goes to forest and get fruit and feeds her Swami, her husband. Okay, so that is so. Anytime the crop yield goes and inferior crop you get, it's a women's health which suffers the most. Climate change has made search for livelihoods tougher, created greater food insecurity, caused sharp decline in quality of life, and triggered mass migration. And that we saw recently also under the COVID pandemic, mass migration, which took place because if you don't get livelihood, what do? You try to depend on your extended family, but they are also poor, they are also deprived. So again, the circular migration, until they went back, they came back. Again, they went back, again, they came back at the second lockdown. So the Human Development Report also highlighted that micro-level studies have revealed that Indian women born during floods in the 70s were 19% late likely to affect their education. And also the climate change have potential to make high-risk ventures for those whose capacity to manage this risk in terms of both personal choice and personal income is minimal. So you saw even the Kerala floods. So who managed the floods? It was the Kutumbashri. It was the self-help groups of women who managed the women in Kutumbashri. They jumped into the water, they saved human lives, they ran community kitchen, they helped women to rebuild their shattered life because they had lost everything. So with able-bodied men searching for livelihood opportunities in the cities, more women than men are ever left to do low-paying agriculture jobs. I think classic example we can see in Maharashtra, that rural to urban migration. All men come to the cities like Pune, Nashik, Aurangabad, Mumbai, and women are there. So women-headed households in the villages are sometimes 65%. Out of every 3 households, 2 are managed by women. Men go there only at the time of sowing, and because now also we have a practice that women can't use plow. Plow is a phallic symbol. Okay, so men do the plowing and go at the time of harvesting because you get money. So the cash goes in the hands of money. Throughout the year, all the ups and downs of heavy rains or winter or scorching heat, and it is women who are working in the field. So there are many case studies of Gauribai of Bundelkhand, how they have used various multi-crop systems to in a water scarce area, or in Sundarban where you have a lot of water logging happening because of floods, and they ever said that they are losing the fish varieties because of the recurring flood and the destruction that is taking place. One Garimathai's example I gave you, that in 2004 she got Nobel Peace Prize. Another was a Shahina Begum. She is a very important work that she did in Bangladesh, where she is dedicated her life to prepare women to cope up with disaster with a lot of resilience and collective endeavor that she promoted. There are efforts by the women farmers who have fought against soil erosion and who have regenerated degraded soil, which were made cultivable. Then women are also building vegetation facades or infiltration ditches and open trenches to see to it that the speed of water goes down and it doesn't damage the crop. So from their day-to-day experiences and collective wisdom, which they have inherited for generations, women are trying to protect their communities. So that is why the women farmers, tribal women's organized, they are demanding that respect collective wisdom of women. I went for a training program of engineers in Karnataka. I was invited by Kavad, Karnataka Water Management, Karnataka Agency for Water Resource Management, Kavad. So they were pipeline engineers, mechanical engineers, environmental engineers, civil engineers. And when we started talking about water, because Kavad is mainly for water, okay, water security. And so these engineers were saying, no, madam, best solution is to commercialize water. And there is, but in any case, in your state, women are walking. See all the studies, women have to walk for so many miles. There are Tollywood movies, Tanneer movie with the superstar Sarita that was made on the water woes of southern states. But they said no. But for poor people, no, they can buy pouch of 1 rupee. 1 rupee pouch they can buy, and that will solve their problem of water. So imagine a privileged city-bred engineers talking about commercialization of water and not consider. So you talk about water for agriculture, you talk about water for industry, water for institutions, but not water for a household of a poor women. Okay, so this is the kind of biases that we see, and that's why it is very important to have aggregating local knowledge and recent breakthroughs in agriculture and environmental research and development, and the insights for a better management of natural resources. We had a very good scheme in our country called Jala Swarajya, where as a result of a very strong movement which was created in Maharashtra called Pani Panchayat. It was a single issue political movement just focusing on just distribution of water in Maharashtra. Okay, and it was in response to so many severe droughts which rural Maharashtra and tribal Maharashtra had faced. And as a result, government says, okay, we will create a body in every village. We will have a Jala Swarajya, where the representatives of government, elected representatives of Panchayat, and women of the village, they will take the decision about what kind of water, how many wells and decentralized water bodies and small ponds, and what kind of tube the tube water pipeline from which area it should go, because generally water is cornered by the upper caste and powerful people. The people who are poor and Dalit, they don't get it. Who are in the outskirts, they don't get it. In fact, in Maharashtra, most of the cases of rape of Dalit women, they are very much linked to water issues, because they don't have, in Dalit bastis, you don't have water. They come to the in search of water in a Savarna basti, and then they said you have contaminated our water, and massive violence takes place. So it is very important to take women's insights and women's experiential knowledge. So sharing of information as efficiently as possible, it emerged as an urgent and pressing requirement, whether it was in the form of advanced bulletin or weather pattern or timely data on market trends. So it's very, like in Jharkhand, I saw these young boys and girls in a local Santali language, they run the FM radio. Now you have many community radios, no? So in FM radio, they will have their Jharkhand song, but in between they would also tell the farmers and tribal people that, okay, if you have collected 10, do leave. Don't do distress sell. Okay, don't give 10 kg of rice for this much of salt. Don't. You can get salt at a very low cost in this particular city. Okay, so giving this kind of information is so important for them. I saw that the way these kids, 12th pass or inter students, they were running this community radio, which was giving proper knowledge, whether it is about the weather bureau or it's going to rain, so keep all your crop, cover it with plastic. Plastic is available in this particular mandi. So all this kind of information they would give. Another thing is the women, how long women have to walk. So there are so many energy expenditure studies. And recently, Government of India in 2019, for the first time, Ministry of Statistics has come up with a time use analysis. And it shows that on an average, Indian women, and this time use analysis took place in 2019-20. That means COVID period also. On an average, Indian women spend 299 minutes on unpaid care work. And on an average, Indian men spend 99 minutes on unpaid care work. That means 5 times more the women are spending. And they are, and this work is unrewarded, non-recognized, invisibilized. So globally, as well as in India, now there is a demand that care economy and the value of care economy has to be there. Recently, you saw some 1 or 2 political parties in South, they also said that housewives work should be, housewives should be paid for the care work that they do. And there have been several judgments by the Supreme Courts of India and several high courts in our country, which does the time allocation, the study, monetization and the opportunity cost of the care work they have done. And accordingly, they have settled the compensation, whether it's an accident compensation, where man would be compensated for the wages. Need to unmute? Now, okay, I have unmuted. Yeah. Is it okay? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So that is also very important. Time allocation and the value of care economy is very important, because women are primary caregivers, and they also, this caregiving activity also impacts their other, whether it's a career or choice. We know that in India, 40% of women with MBA degree are not pursuing career. Why? Because they have a responsibility of elderly care, child care, and also domestic duties. And currently, there is a massive withdrawal. In fact, the economists are saying that women have been more damaged in terms of loss of livelihood, loss of job, both in the rural and tribal area as well as in the urban setting. Another very important demand that has emerged is that food is a human right. It is not a corporate commodity for speculation. Mother Nature doesn't operate on boardroom profit. Corporate profit will merely lead to more food crisis. And in response to COVID-19 pandemic, women leaders of 18 countries, they opted for policies and they raised a slogan, people before profit. So universal income support, food security, running of community kitchens on a long-term basis, providing food packets, because people have lost their support and livelihood, and it is our duty. So just don't get obsessed only about GDP and the balance of payment. Okay, all of us have to all the nation states have to commit the fund for combating the coronavirus. Dalit women, we have also, there have been many best practices in terms of collective work to adapt climate change, and they in the arid degraded land in Uttar Pradesh, in the border of Uttar Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh, Jhansi, they came up with the 19 types of indigenous crop in 1 acre of land. That means multi-crop can also enhance the soil quality. The collective and their experiment was so successful that nearly 5,000 women in 75 villages in that district, they used chemical-free, non-irrigated organic agriculture as one method of combating global warming. We have also seen similar things happening in the Pacific Islands, where we have seen that Pacific Islands, the nuclear testing that happens, against that there is a strong movement of fisher folks and women. And also they say that the climatic changes have so many times submerged their islands, sea level rises, coastal erosion takes place, temperature rises. So there is a very strong women's movement. The research on renewable energy potential, that is also very important agenda. It could help in responding to the scenario where the policy and finance measures quickly scale up proven technologies for the poor, including small hydro and solar power. So rainwater harvesting has now been very much an accepted policy by most of the state governments, and also the green economy also. Decentralized water bodies, creation of the decentralized water bodies so that the devastation and destruction at the time of heavy downpour is less. Recycling and reuse. And there are organizations like Bhugyan, which also talks about which also shares, it's a knowledge sharing portal. An integrated knowledge system on climate change adaptation, and all the South Asian countries, they are uploading whatever information or the best practices they have are shared there. So the recognition of women's central role in the sustainable development, human rights based approach, gender justice, social protection for disadvantaged sections, links between employment and environment, social sustainability of any policy, any program, any scheme, any budgetary allocation. You have to do the environment audit, we do gender audit, we do financial audit, we do safety audit, we have to do environment audit, appropriate technology, policy of reduce, reuse and recycle, and also junk is good. Okay, junk is not, you can recycle. There is an organization in Mumbai called Sri Mukti Sangatna. They have a project called Parisar Bhagini, where these women who are doing the recycling work, they classify the recycled material. Bombay generates the highest waste in India in terms, and which is reusable. So they also sign MOUs with various housing societies, colleges, hospitals, BARC and TISS. Main campus of TISS is a zero waste campus, thanks to this Parisar Bhagini project. And so plastic, metal, paper, degradable organic waste. Organic waste is used for generation of electricity and gas, cooking gas, and remaining is sold for you. So junk is good. So waste management, very important. And also, what is the genuine, now the new index has come. We talk about so many, we talk about gender, human development index, gender development index, happiness index, and this is the genuine progress index. So genuine progress index doesn't focus only on economic growth, but it focuses on education, health, justice, dignity of a person, environmental justice, economic justice, gender justice, and also the social justice, that is dealing with the inequality. So with this kind of a perspective, currently if we see lot of organizations and individuals and civil society organizations are working globally as well as in our country, and now even in the cities, the awareness about climate justice and climate change and what kind of people's mitigating efforts that we can make has been coming up in a big way. Yeah. Thank you. So integration of society, economy, ecology, and overall environment in which we live. And it is all based on Mahatma Gandhi's philosophy. And I quote, the world has enough for everyone's need, but not enough for everyone's greed. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for thought-provoking session and enlightening us with your valuable knowledge. And as you quote Mahatma Gandhi, yes, we cannot feed everyone's greed. It's really true. Ma'am, we will move forward to question and answer session. First of all, I'll say so many people have praised your presentation and has demanded your PPT. If you can provide your PPT to our participants.
I'll share it immediately after the session. I will send it to the organizers.
Yes,
or if it is, yeah.
Ma'am, first question is, 1 minute. There is one comment, basically, I can say it is a comment rather than it is the, I'll say it is a question, but it concludes the question. I too agree and believe that women are change agent, but still they are sufferer. Why still recognition is less?
I think because of the 500 years of patriarchal control over women's sexuality, fertility, labor, and collective wisdom, like the challenge to this kind of a patriarchal control has history of only 200 years. It was with the Mary Wollstonecraft in 1792 when she wrote about subjection of women, and which had a ripple effect. So I think we need to more, and we have, and patriarchy is a very powerful institution, very flexible institution, because it adjusts under any circumstances where the, and also perpetuates subordination, domination relationship between man and women, or what Lavanya told about the alternate genders or gender minorities, which are the gender minorities LGBTQIA, those who don't fit into the heterosexual norm. They also get brutalized, women also get brutalized. So we have to challenge patriarchy at every level. It is like an octopus. You remove one tentacle. So in your personal life, okay, you convince your parents that I want to become engineer, but after that you go to the workplace and again there is patriarchy. The male engineers, they feel threatened. How come suddenly we saw what happened after 30% reservation was given by government of Maharashtra in 1991 in engineering college? I remember all the teachers and principals were sending their senior teachers for a training program on counseling for caregivers because the boys were so agitated. They were not used to having women in campus. Okay, engineering college is supposed to be male monopoly. So I think power sharing is very difficult. For 5,000 years, if those who have had unquestioned power to control, use, abuse women, it's not so easy for them to give up the power. Okay, so we need more and more consciousness raising, and as the national education policy says, we have to start gender sensitization at a very young age. So early childhood education, right from the age of 3, we have to continuously give message of gender equity, respect for each other, solution of any difference of opinion without use of violence. If you don't like your dal your wife has made, then you have no right to bash her up. And that's what the general, anytime we do the counseling, पति ने क्यों मारा क्योंकि दाल में उसको नमक कम पड़ा. You could have taken namak and put it in, or cook yourself, or feed her also. So these kind of the changes that we need to bring at a very, because when a boy is violent, everyone is elated. I come from a Patidar community where anytime boys were mischievous, people were glorifying them. Oh my God, he's so active, he's so smart. And if a girl, even if she argued that, look, what you are doing is, they said, oh, you should hush up. You should only follow the order of what is given to you. So this is the kind of inequality we are going to nurture right from the birth of a child. And you don't even, in India, you don't even allow a girl to be born, where you resort to sex selective abortion. Imagine what would happen. I know so many families where mother had to accept sex selective abortion, and it has a tremendous impact on self-esteem of surviving girls. Okay, they feel so unwanted. So if this is the kind of scenario that we need to change, and change has to come from within. So, and what the slogan of women's movement, personal is political. Okay, you can't divide that in personal life I'll be subjugated and in public life I will talk of equality. No, it has to be in the both the realm. You need to have it. So we have a long way to go. But I think if we all are together and we continuously hammer this question of gender inequality, it has to be always center stage. Women's issues can't wait. And that's what they say. Plus, all of us should also say that we are not only decorative pieces. We don't only make coffee, we make policy. So that is the one what these 18 women leaders of during the pandemic have proved.
Ma'am, next question is how to increase the training of disaster management in women group currently. Men are mostly trained in this.
Yeah, so that's why we all have this kind of programs are very, very important. So that, see, Lavanya was my student, okay, 3 years back. And now she's a resource person. She works in Center for Disaster Management. And if you work for disaster management, all these topics are interdisciplinary. If I say that I'm an economist, I'll stick to economics, that will not do. I'll have to understand geography. I'll have to understand climate issues. I'll have to understand all the concepts and this thing. So interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary, multidisciplinary perspective is very important. Then only we'll be able to convince engineers and technocrats and architects and scientists who are currently deciding climatic policies. To challenge them, or to not even challenge, just to even enter into meaningful dialogue, result-oriented dialogue. They should not think that you are Dumbo. No, that you're the business. You are a hardworking person, and you are ready to understand from that. As like I went for, it was a 3-hour session with these engineers. Karnataka Watershed Development Program had called me as a gender expert. I also learned a lot from them because they are in the field. They are the man of action. But they were also gender blind. They had a very strong city bias. They had never faced hardship in their life. In fact, the training program was to be in one modest academic institution. They rebelled. They wanted a resort. So the organizers had to last moment change the venue from modest academic seminar room in Bangalore city to a World Wildlife guest house, which was very, very exotic. No? So if these are the kind of, we need to, like, there was a very good experiment made by Center for Women's Development Studies under the leadership of Professor Veena Majumdar. You know, Veena Majumdar is one of the pioneers of women's studies in our country. She used to organize, when the joint forest management, there was a big movement in Rajasthan where women who were involved in stopping desertification, you know, the sand storms, they devastated people. So it was the women who converted this desert storm, the areas with desert storm, into green belt by planting trees. Now, when the desert storms were taking place, women were the ones who protected saplings by bodily presence. They would encircle the plant so that desert storm doesn't kill them. They would walk for miles together to water these plants. And when these plants became trees, the local vested interest man, they said, now you go, you are the daily wage worker. You have no stakes in this thing. And then the ILO also did a very good study, and they called it, and these women, they did a role play, goats and tigers. Women are goats, men are tigers. And they did, Rajasthan has a game called Chopad. Okay, Chopad, which Pandavas and Kauravas also they did in Mahabharata. And they said that what are the forces which make finally, when the resources are ready, men take over and they just drive us out. And this should stop. And as a result, Government of India came up with a scheme called JFLS, Joint Forest Management. This thing. So all stake groups, women in the forest, bureaucrats, and elected representatives, all three should have a decision-making power. And training program for the bureaucrats was organized. And Veena, they would make all the engineers and environmentalists and architects and politicians sit as a participant. And all these forest women, they were the resource persons. And they said, now you speak. And it was a completely changed scenario. And they understood that under what circumstances people are working, they are doing so much for the forest, and we are criminalizing them. All the forest laws, who makes the forest laws? Where are the judges and lawyers who are drafting these laws? They are sitting in Delhi. They're looking at their own reality of their garden around their bungalow. They come up with a forest law. That's not the way forests are operating. You need to understand the complexity and the symbiotic relationship of local dwellers, inhabitants. Recently, you saw that Vidya Balan movie. The script is written by a women studies student. She has written the screenplay. So sensitively. She says, though she's a helpless bureaucrat, as a single bureaucrat, she can't. There is not a big movement backing her up. What is it called? Sherni.
Sherni.
Yeah. So this kind of sensitization is very, very important to change the mindset. The way Vangari did, Vangari Matai, how she changed the mindset of African farmers. Don't go for a cheap profit, just which is not going to even last. What you need is a sustainable life for African people, African villages. Just Nestle giving or some coffee corporate making coffee and cocoa and chocolate. If they give you certain dollars, it's not going to change your life. Tipco women said this 80 rupees or 100 rupees by the timber merchant is not going to take you anywhere. It's going to keep you in a perpetual state of indebtedness. Or the same way the SHGs of widows of farmers who have committed suicide. You read their manifesto in which is supported by Bank of Maharashtra in a Vidarbha. What these women write? We will not, our SHG will lend money only for women empowerment, education, health, skill building. We will not indulge in dowry, giving and taking of dowry. We will not give money for sex selective abortion of a female child. Okay, sonography ke liye we will not give money for sonography. We will not indulge into ostentatious marriages. Our SHG believes that we will not go for commercial crop of a sunflower or orchid or some other commercial crop at the cost of subsistence. If I have 2 acres of land, I'll see to it at least in half an acre, we cultivate vegetables, fruits, and the seasonal fruits and food. I don't want my family to starve. If I'm in a dairy industry, I'll see to it that 1 liter of milk is kept for the house. Just to get 20, 30 rupees or 40 rupees, I will not starve my children of milk. So this is the level of consciousness I think we need at every level. That don't go for short-term gain. Think about the long-term future, or just pulling out girl when there is a crisis, pulling out girl from going to school. You're doing damaging your own family. It is not the damage only to that girl, because this girl, if she gets educated, she will bring the whole household in a very big. She'll give a very good quality of life to whole family. She is going to be your budhape ka sahara. She is going to. So I think this kind of education and has to be done at a very early age, and that's why I think that the new education policy talking about gender sensitization right from pre-primary is an excellent idea. Throughout the education, the issue has to be hammered. The way environmental education, Janagana Mana, we never forget. No, every time we have program, we sing Janagana. Same way, every time we have anything, you have to bring in gender question. Gender ke chashme se dunya ko dekho. See the world, and as Lavanya said, what are the differential vulnerabilities? Use that angle, use that spectacle to understand the reality.
Ma'am, next question. What if every family starts doing subsistence farming on their own in accordance to their needs and stimulously upskilling the farmers in India for more formal jobs or for exporting the food which could not be grown in the area? Still, the idea in the lines of the SDG or not a solution at all?
Yeah. See, first of all, the pandemic has given us a very important lesson, where whole economy, each and every sector of the economy had a downturn and negative growth. Agriculture is the only one which reported 11% growth, okay? Both in 2019-20 and 2021. So that is a one listing. And plus, because of the other industrial pollution and all of the negative impact has been curtailed, even the agriculture production is of a very good quality. You must have noticed recently, except for some fruits which are very expensive, other things have become accessible. Another thing that urban gardening as a concept is also becoming more popular. In fact, so many people over last 1.5 years of lockdown and sitting at home have adopted the policy of urban gardening, where the herbal plants and this. So each and every person doing food sufficiency, that is impractical, because in the urban areas you don't have that kind of land to do that. What you can have is couple of pots you can have in your gated community, or in the basti you can't have one tulsi plant itself is a big thing for people in 10 by 10 room where 10-15 people are staying. But I think the idea of food sovereignty, food self-sufficiency, and not to compromise, and I think India would never do it, because we have faced so much humiliation in 1960-63, where we had to sign such a humiliating MOU with USA, where the wheat, which was not even given to their pigs, was sent to India. My generation would remember how we used to stand in a queue at the time of Indo-Pak and Indo-China war. Even when you were middle class, even when you had money, you had to stand in a queue for ration, for lal gahu. And so difficult to eat that gahu, because even your chapati would be worse than chamdi. They used to call chamdi, not even, they would say it is so stretchable, you just can't chew it, no? That kind. So after that, India, when it adopted Green Revolution and buffer stock, always, like, we have never heard of a mass hunger death in India after that, no? Never. Like China experienced it in 78 when China opened up its economy and stopped, they had a big drought and more than 2 million people died, okay, in China. Such kind of hunger deaths we haven't experienced. There have been hunger deaths in certain tribal areas where PDS doesn't reach on time. But the food self-sufficiency and food sovereignty, and that's why you know that even in the World Trade Organization and GATT, General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs, so many times they are bringing up the issue of IPR regime, intellectual property right regime. India is the only leader which opposes this. Nothing can be done. Otherwise, poor countries will die, because all the Rice Research Institute, Wheat Research Institute, Macon Research Institute, everything is cornered by US intellectual property regime. They come to our country, do some research, tamarind and turmeric, and you name a thing, even a kadi patta, everything is patented by them, and each and every country would end up giving patent royalty to the rich countries, which will further accentuate inequality. And currently, recent pandemic also, we have seen 60% of the world's medicine is supplied by India. Why? Because we did not accept we are still going by the Paris, we are going by the process patenting, not by the product patenting, which rich countries want us to accept, and we will never accept it. Okay, so I think this whole politics, global politics of control over resources, whether it's a knowledge resources, because intellectual property talks about knowledge resources, and the material resources, I think about that, and that's why so many poor countries, developing countries of Africa, Asia, Latin America, they look up to India. That at least it's a big country, and it can also can't be totally engulfed or totally gobbled by rich countries.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for this. I feel our participants must have gained immense knowledge by your such a valuable knowledge, and your such a way of telling us the stories of your childhood and the during the your age, what things you have faced. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you.
You are muted. You are muted, Aarti.
Okay, sorry, ma'am. Sorry. Feedback link for today's session is posted in our chat box. Please fill the feedback form. Now I'll request Ms. Samita Sengupta, convener of WDC, to propose formal vote of thanks. Over to you, Samita ma'am.
Samita ma'am, you're muted.
I take this opportunity to propose vote of thanks. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah. I take this opportunity to propose vote of thanks. First of all, I extend my deepest gratitude to your respected principal, Madam Dr. Lily Bhushan, whose consistent aspiration has motivated us to take up this program. Secondly, my sincere thanks goes to our management, whose support is always with us. Thirdly, I profoundly express my sincere gratitude to our respected eminent speakers, Dr. Lavanya Shanvaus, who has thrown light on today's topic very vigorously and efficiently. My sincere thanks and gratitude and acknowledgement goes to our eminent speakers, Dr. Vibhuti Patel, who has been a guide, mentor, as well as a philosopher for our College of K.A. Shroff College. And ma'am has presented the entire topics of today's discussion in a very, very lucid and very, very comprehensive manner. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank
I
you.
also extend my gratefulness to our respected chairperson, Dr. Vanita Simony, whose support has motivated us to conduct this program. I also extend my warmest thanks, and it goes to all the participants who has devoted their time and patiently having attended the seminar. Last but not the least, my deep appreciation goes to all the teacher members of WDEC as well as the student members whose consistent support has made this program a great success, and it has become possible because of the great support. Thank you so much, and over to Aarti madam.
Thank you, ma'am. Participants, please fill the feedback form. Our link for the feedback form will be open till 8 p.m. Then we will close the link. And I'll request all the participants that we will be sharing feedback link only in the chat box and not anywhere, not on the email or not on the our WhatsApp sensor.